Welcome to Teletype Talk, Episode 4. I'm your host, Joe. So today we're going to talk about a few things. The first one is getting some very specific voltages out of your teletype, and how to use the teletype to assist you with figuring out what those voltages should be. We're going to set up a lookup table that we can use with these very specific voltages to control another module. And we're also going to get in a little bit more to the ecosystem. We're going to set up a keyboard using grid ops. And we're just going to kind of very barely tip our toe into the Telex output expander, the TXO, and use that. So hope that sounds like some exciting stuff. Let's get started. So you can pick any module that you want to control with these very specific voltages that we're going to be using the teletype to help us determine and store. The module that I've chosen is the IntelliGel Silonix shapeshifter. And the reason for that, it's got this chord mode on it, and you can control the chord type that it's playing with control voltage. But as I'm going to show you here, there are a lot of chords to choose from, and so it requires a very specific voltage to select the right chord. So we're going to use the teletype to help with that. Let me just first kind of show you what this looks like. So I've got this in a mode where we're playing a waveform, and as I move this knob right here, this is mod B, and as I move through that, you're going to see it cycle through different chord types up here. So let's just take a look and listen to kind of doing this manually. So you can hear there's a lot of different chord types to choose from, so I'm going to have to be I've got a little bit of wiggle room, but I'm generally going to have to be very accurate with the voltage that I send into it if I want to select a specific chord. So let's set up Teletype to help us select and store those voltages. So as we know, the teletype only sends positive voltages out between 0 and 10 volts. The shapeshifter is actually expecting for this CV input voltage, a bipolar voltage from -5 to 5. So what I'm going to do here is just run the output of Teletype CV1. And I'm going to take that and plug that into Maths channel 1. And then I'm going to take the sum output of Maths and connect that into my mod B input on the shapeshifter. And that's just going to, I've already got the knobs set up correctly to kind of give me a -5 to 5 volt shift like I want. So if I unmute this sound now, and what I can do is just send some voltages out of CV1, right? So let's do that. So let's send 10 volts out. Cool. So what I want to actually do is use the teletype to help me select which voltages correspond to which notes. So let's write a script. I'm going to go back to my Metro script. And instead of manually setting the voltage here with the command line, what I want to do is every time Metro fires, I want to set CV1 equal to the value of my PARAM knob. Now let's go back and fire Metro really fast as we can, every 25 milliseconds. Actually, that's not quite true. There's another command in here called M exclamation point, and you can set this to values as low as 2 milliseconds. This is, I guess, for some reason considered experimental. Anyway, we don't need it to be that fast, so we'll just do the regular Metro command, 25 milliseconds. And now every time Metro fires, we should set CV1 equal to the value of the param knob. As I twist the param knob, you can watch the light, and we're going to watch the voltage go up and down. And so now if I turn the unmute my mixer here, what you'll notice is that as I sweep the param knob, we're going to get all of the different available chords. Cool. So one of the CVs I'd like to send out is going to select the chord. The other one I would like to select the note number. So let's use, for right now, let's use X to store our note number. So X is currently equal to 0. So after we send the CV1, the value of our param knob, let's send CV2, the note number equal to X. And so I'll take CV2, and I'm just going to connect that up to the shapeshifter's volt per octave pitch input. All right, so if I unmute now, we dropped a little bit, so let's set X equal to 12. So there's where we were. Perfect. So now what I'd like to do, now that I can use my param knob to select voltages that correspond to chords, and I can use the variable X to correspond to notes that I want to send out, what I want to do is build a little lookup table of notes and the corresponding chord that goes along with them. So I don't want to do this by hand. Let's actually use the shapeshifter to set this up for us. So I'm going to pop over here and we'll go to... let's do this on script 8. So what I want to do is I want to take the value that we're storing in X, and I also want to get the value of this param knob. And what I want to do is pop these numbers onto the pattern, 2 patterns actually. So I'm going to use pattern 1, or pattern 0 actually, this first column for the note number, and I'll use pattern 1, the second column, to store whatever value of the param knob corresponds to that chord type that I want to put out. So if I go back here to script 8, we're going to use pn.push. And what this is going to do is push something onto the pattern that we give it. So we'll start with pattern 0, and what I want to push onto pattern 0 when I fire the script is the value of X. That's our note number. And the second pattern, pattern 1, we'll do a pn push here as well. And for this one, we actually want to store this in pattern number 1, and let's grab the value of the param knob. So now when I fire script 8 over here, I'm just going to hit my F8 key to do that, and we're kind of on a C. Actually, let's select the chord that we want. So I'm going to unmute here. And that's what I want right there, is a C major. So let me go ahead and hit F8 to fire that script. And you'll see what happened there. It grabbed the value of X, which was set to 36, and it grabbed the value of the param knob, which is currently set to 50, 60, it looks like. So we don't care what that is. We just know that that corresponds to a major chord on the shapeshifter. So I've got my first 2 values set up in my lookup table here. Let's go ahead and grab a second. So I actually want to make this like a major scale of triads. So we'll go ahead and we'll take X and we'll set that manually equal to 38. So we'll kind of go C sharp D. So this should be a D. And I want this to be a D minor. So let's set that up. I'm going to unmute. and that's a D minor. And I don't actually have to flip to this pattern screen for this to work, but I'm just kind of showing you as we go. So we'll fire script 8 with the F8 key again. And we've grabbed some new values here into the next, we've pushed them onto these patterns as the next value. So I've got 38, which is going to correspond to a D. And it looks like 4316 is going to correspond to a minor. Let's do the next one, which is going to be an E minor. So I'll, again, move X up to D sharp and then E. So we'll move up to 40. And we're already set on a minor chord, so without even unmuting, I can just go ahead and hit F8 again, and we'll grab that next set of values. Next, we'll go back to an F major. So this, there's no half note in between these two, so we can just set X equal to 41. That's going to correspond to an F. And I just want to hear this one again, and we'll find the major chord once again. Hit F8 to grab those values. Let's move up to a G. Hit F8 to grab that value. We'll move up to an A. And we're going to make that minor. F8. And I think the B in the scale is diminished, so let's try to find that. So we'll move up to X up to 47, and let me try to find the. I can't remember if it's diminished or half diminished here. We're just going to go with diminished. I'll try to find that. There's diminished. Let me hit F8 to grab those set of values. So if I come back to my pattern, now we've got a pattern built up with 7 values. We've got kind of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then major, minor, minor, major, major, diminished. Oh, sorry. Major, minor, minor, major, major. We've got a minor again, and then a diminished. Yeah, I think that's right. I guess we'll see. Anyway, so what I've built here is kind of a lookup table, right? So if I'm talking about pattern index 0, I'm going to get a C note out and a major chord out. So, you could sequence these things. But actually, we're going to take a look at something different. We're going to look at taking the monome grid, this guy, and building a little keyboard out of it that is going to reference this lookup table. And, depending on what button we hit on it, it's going to give us a note and its corresponding chord type. Okay, so one small change that I've made here is rather than just letting the shapeshifter drone, I've connected it up through a VCA and an envelope generator. And what I want to do is use the teletype to trigger this. So I'm going to go ahead and connect trigger out 1 into the input gate of my envelope. I'm actually using the ER301 to do this, but you can use any VCA and envelope that you'd like to. I just want to test this out and make sure it works really quickly. So let me do a TR pulse 1. Cool, and I get a sound out, which is what I was hoping for. It's just kind of an attack release envelope that I've got on here. Let's see. So the first thing we want to do, I think, is to configure the grid. And the normal place you would want to probably do this is in the init script. And what we're going to do is build a set of 7 buttons to correspond to the 7 lookup values that we have set up in our table. So let's do a g.btn, and I'm going to hopefully put the the command reference up for this on the screen for you as we go through. So the first thing we need to do is give this an ID. So I think we can use 0, but I'm just going to start with 1, and this is, every group of buttons that you have would have a different ID with it. Actually, each button will have a different ID with it. So we're going to start actually here at ID number 1, and these buttons are going to have different IDs. The next thing we need to do is give it an X value. Just for visual reference here, let's pop the grid up here. I can almost get it in the frame here. So we've got X going across this direction and Y going across this direction. So X and Y is kind of like where the set of buttons going to start. So for X, I think we're going to maybe start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's start at 5 over, and let's start at 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's start it at 4 down. So the next parameters are X and Y. So we'll do X equal to 5 and Y equal to 4. So that's kind of where we'll position this row of buttons. The next parameters to GBTX are width and height, and we actually just want each button to be 1 wide and 1 high. So they'll just be single grid buttons. The next parameter is the type. I'm going to set this to 0. I would have to actually look this up. This is the right type we want. I think 1 might be like a latching button, and these are just going to be more like triggered buttons. The next thing we want to set is the level, and I think this is like from 0 to 15, and this is just kind of like the brightness when they're not pressed. So let's set this to just a 5 for starters and see how that looks. The next thing we need is the script that is going to fire. So let's set that to script 1. So every time we press a button or release a button, it's going to fire script 1. The next parameters are the columns and rows. So actually here we are going to want 7 columns worth. That's going to correspond to our 7 lookup table values. And we just want 1 row. So that's like a whole boatload of parameters there, but these grid operators are really compact so that you can do a lot with just 1 line of code. So definitely a place where it's pretty handy to have the Teletype cheat sheet printed out to follow along closely. I'm going to hope this works. Oh, too many params. What have I done here? 411. I did G button and not G button X. So G.btn just creates a single button. This is actually going to create multiple buttons. I think that is my problem. Yep, so that took. Since I put this in the init script, normally this script would load up, whenever you load a scene out of the memory, it would actually run this script once initially. But since I'm just building this scene, it hasn't started up yet. So let's go ahead and run this script I'm going to hit my F10 key to run it. And if I pop back over here now and hit Alt-G, it's actually going to show me a representation of my grid. And there's 2 views of it. This one right here is kind of a smaller display of the grid, and it's actually got the contents of some of your variables and what they're set to over here, so that kind of thing is pretty handy. If I hit Alt-G again, it's going to take me into kind of a full screen view of the grid. The difference between these, when I'm in this smaller kind of view with the extra information available on it, I have to hold down my Alt key to move around, and I can hit my Alt space key to actually trigger one of these buttons. If I hit Alt-G again to go into kind of the full screen grid view, I don't have to hold down the Alt key anymore. I can just hit my arrow keys or my space key to trigger one of these buttons. So that's kind of what those 2 different views are set up for. It looks like we've successfully created a row of buttons kind of here in the middle of the grid, just like we wanted to do, so that's cool. And these grids buttons should be firing script 1. So let's test that out really quick. I'm going to come back over to script 1 here, and I'm just going to do a tr.pulse 4. All I want to do here is see a light, this light right here. When I press one of these grid buttons, I want to see if that fires it. So if I come back in here, let me go ahead and go into the full screen, and I'm just going to hit my space key, and you can see that this light is firing. It doesn't really matter which one of these buttons I press, it fires that light. One thing I want you to notice here is that if I hold down my space key, when I release it, let me let go now, it actually fires the script again. So there's kind of two events here. There's kind of like the button has been pressed and the button has been released. And it fires script 1 on either event. So that's going to be kind of important for us to know when setting up our keyboard. Okay, let's see. So we don't really want to fire trigger pulse 4. Actually, what we want to do is fire trigger pulse 1. That's what we set up over here. I didn't think you'd be able to see that light very well in the video, so let's switch that. Now when I come over here, let me do Alt space. And we get a sound out. So that's exactly what we want. But we don't want to just do that. We also actually want to set the note number, which we have on output 2, I believe, right? So let's go ahead and set the note number. I'm going to insert a line here. And actually, before we even do that, I want to do one other thing. I mentioned that there are two events here. We don't want this script to really run when we release the grid button, only when we press it down. When we release, because we're kind of using an attack release envelope right now, we don't really want it to do anything. So let's put another line in here that says if g.btnv, so that's the value of the button that we just pressed, and if that is equal to 0, let's break. So basically what that means is every time we press a button, the script is going to fire. If we're getting a 0 value back out of that button, meaning that it's released, we're just going to break and we're not going to run anything else in this script. But if it's a 1, meaning that the button has been pressed down, we'll go ahead and run this script. Okay, so let's go ahead and set our pitch. All right, we're going to have a little splicing moment here. So I was trying to set the pitch. What I didn't realize is that I still had Metro running every 25 seconds, and the Metro script is actually setting these CVs for me. So it was very quickly overriding whatever I did. So hopefully this comes off okay. I'm going to go ahead and deactivate Metro, m.act0, turn the metronome script off, and now let's come over here to script number 1, and let's again try to set the pitch. So I'm going to put a new line in here, and let's see. We're going to set. We're going to be setting CV. Actually, let's compute this first. Let's store this in like variable a, and we're going to set a equal to. What we want to do is get g.button x. That's going to give me the horizontal column of the button that was just pressed. And since we offset these buttons by 5, let's subtract 5 from this and store that in A. And now what I want to do is take CV2, which is going out to the pitch output on the shapeshifter, and I want to set that equal to the note in pattern number 0 at position A. So that's going to give me note numbers between 36 and 47, I hope. Let's come back in here into the grid view, and let me just trigger some of these. Perfect. Just like we want. All right. So we're successfully setting the note value. Let's go ahead and set the chord. So we'll insert a new line here. And this time we're going to set CV number 1. That's the one I've got going into the input that's controlling the chord on the shapeshifter. And let's go ahead and set that. This time we're not going to use a note value. This time we just kind of want the raw value because it was the value that corresponded to this parameter knob. So let's set that equal to pattern number 1 at whatever A is. We'll come back to the full screen view, and what I'm hearing there is a major. Cool. So we've got a little keyboard set up. Right now it's just on screen, but I'm going to go ahead and plug the grid in so that we can see how this works with the hardware. So I did want to quickly show you what I've got set up to switch between my alphanumeric keyboard and the grid. I'm using this module right here on the end. It's a scanner darkly module. It's called the 2-to-1. So I've got my alphanumeric keyboard plugged into slot 1, and I've got my grid plugged into slot number 2, and there's just this little rocker switch on the bottom, so if I move it to the left position, it uses the alphanumeric keyboard. If I flip it to the right, it uses the, sorry, if I flip it, it's an up-down switch. If I flip it down, it uses the grid. So I don't know if you can get these modules anymore. There may be some left. I guess you'd have to contact Scanner Darkly on the Lines forum if you're interested in one. They're pretty handy if you do a lot of grid programming to just be able to quickly switch back and forth. Okay, so I've flipped the switch on the Scanner Darkly module, or I have it connected up. Let me flip the switch. And so we get a row of buttons now on the grid that corresponds just like we saw on the Teletype's LCD display. And as I press these, they should do exactly what they did on screen. Cool, huh? So congratulations, you've just made your very first grid ops app with the Teletype. Okay, the final thing I want to do here, just to add a little bit more interest to this grid-based keyboard that we've created. I'm actually running this, like I said, into the shapeshifter, and the shapeshifter is a wavetable oscillator. So what I'd like to actually do is kind of get different waveforms with each button press. So, I could use the one of the remaining two CV outputs on the Teletype. One thing I've mentioned, though, is that, those are 0 to 10 volt out. And, generally the shapeshifter is expecting kind of a bipolar -5 to 5 volt into its modulation inputs. So I'm actually going to move over here and use the TXO, the Telex output expander. So this is another one that connects via the backside, via the II bus. The TXO is made by BPC Music. How would you get your hands on one? So first of all, BPC Music has generally made these completely open source. So if you're a handy person that can DIY, you can actually download all of the plans and the bill of materials and everything that you need to get the circuit board printed, get all the hardware, put it all together with all the software. So that's one option. If you're not a handy DIY person like me, then your choices are, I guess, either to find one used, or if you can find someone who is a handy builder to build it for you, perhaps for a fee, that would be another way to get it. And then I think occasionally BPC Music does small runs of these. So I think you can always go to the store at BPC Music and express interest. And, maybe if there's enough interest, BPC Music will do another run. Anyway, this is a really handy module to have if you have a Teletype. It does all manner of cool stuff. We're going to use it for something pretty simple today, and that's just one of its features is that these CV outports can send both positive and negative voltages. So we're going to set that up. I'm going to go ahead and connect this CV1 on the Teletype output expander into the shape 1 parameter, which is controlling the wavetable on this oscillator. And let's move back to the script here, and I'm just going to put one more line in here. And we're going to do TO, that's for Teletype output expander, CV1. These CV outputs are numbered 1 to 4, just like they are on the Teletype. And in this case, we're going to send it VV, which is a voltage. This would take a number from, in the case of the Teletype output expander, it's going to take a number between -1000 and 1000, and that's going to correspond to -10 to 10 volts out. I actually don't quite want to go that far. I just want to go -5 to 5. So let's do ranged random, -500, that's -5 volts, up to 500. So that's going to be positive 5 volts. So every time we trigger a note here, we're going to be setting this to a random voltage between -5 and 5, and that should give us kind of a different tone out of the chord. Let me pop back to the grid display. We'll go full screen here, and we can kind of watch the light here on the output expander. And you can kind of see that for every time I press it, it's giving me a different voltage, and therefore it's giving me a different wave shape on the shapeshifter. All right, so just one more time, we're flipping back into kind of the hardware mode. We've connected the grid up again. Cool. So in conclusion, we've done a few different things today. We've seen how to get some very specific and very accurate voltages out of the teletype. We've learned how to, via the PARAM knob, use the teletype to actually find those specific voltages that we want to set. We've actually used the teletype to populate this lookup table up here with two different values stored in two different patterns, a note number in this case, and just a voltage number that corresponds to a chord type on the shapeshifter. We've looked at just kind of the basics of grid ops and how to set up an array of buttons and how to actually listen to the events that those buttons trigger, both a button down and kind of a button up or release event. We've learned how to filter one of those events out so that we're only kind of listening for the down press. And then we've just started looking at the Teletype output expander over here, which, like I say, is a very versatile module. We'll probably do some more episodes on the Teletype output expander eventually, but just kind of wanted to, start using it for a little bit of something today. So I think that's it. Hope you have enjoyed. Catch you next time.